All right, let's dive in. Today we're taking a closer look at the Book of Jonah. Specifically, those excerpts you sent over.
Okay, yeah.
Now, a prophet on the run from God,
Right.
that's not something you see every day.
It's a fascinating story.
We're going to explore why Jonah was so hesitant, how he tries to escape, and the unexpected consequences that follow.
Yeah. There are a lot of twists and turns.
Get ready for some aha moments, because this story is full of them.
I think what makes Jonah's story so powerful is that he's not this perfect, obedient prophet
Right.
like we often picture. He's very human.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wrestling with fear and prejudice.
It's almost as if he's trying to hit ignore on God's call. But God, being persistent, isn't letting him off that easy.
Yeah.
And that's where things get really interesting. We've got storms, a giant fish, a city on the verge of destruction.
Right. And also those themes of second chances and confronting our biases.
Right.
And that boundless nature of divine compassion.
Absolutely. And those excerpts you chose, very interesting. We have God's direct command to Jonah. Jonah's raw, almost desperate prayer from inside the fish.
Yeah.
And even the king of Nineveh's decree. These snippets really offer a powerful glimpse into the story.
That's fascinating.
So let's set the scene. God instructs Jonah to go to Nineveh,
Okay.
now the Assyrian capital,
Yeah.
and preach against the wickedness of its people.
Right.
Nineveh wasn't your typical ancient city. This was a huge, sprawling metropolis,
It really would.
the heart of a powerful empire. It was said to be so vast it took 3 days to walk through.
Yeah, and that's not just, for dramatic effect.
Right.
It underscores the enormity of Jonah's mission.
That's right.
The Assyrians were infamous for their military might, their brutality. They were the superpower of the time,
Yeah.
feared throughout the ancient world, sending a lone prophet to confront them.
I know.
Like sending a lamb into a lion's den, really.
So picture yourself as Jonah, receiving this command.
Yeah.
What's your first thought? I know what mine would be. I'm out of here.
Right.
And it seems Jonah felt the same way. Because what does he do? He runs in the opposite direction.
Yeah.
Books passage on a ship heading for Tarshish,
Right.
a distant port, possibly as far away as Spain.
As far away as he can get.
It's a pretty clear sign of his resistance, and it really begs the question, why is Jonah so determined to avoid preaching to the Ninevites?
Right.
Is it purely fear for his own safety, or could there be something deeper at play?
Well, fear seems like a reasonable explanation. I mean, wouldn't you be afraid?
Of course.
But, considering the Assyrians were Israel's enemies,
Right.
could his reluctance also stem from prejudice? I mean, could he be struggling with the idea of delivering a message that might actually lead to their salvation?
Right, that's a good point.
To people he may view as undeserving of God's mercy.
Almost like he's questioning who should receive God's mercy and who shouldn't.
That's right. It's a very human struggle.
Yeah. So we have Jonah sailing away from his calling, right? Put as much distance between himself and Nineveh as he can. But as we're going to see, you can't outrun divine intervention.
It can't hide.
A storm erupts.
Yeah.
It's so violent, it threatens to break the ship apart.
And the sailors, these guys are experienced seafarers.
They've seen it all.
Right. They're terrified. They start crying out to their own gods. Right.
Yeah.
Desperately trying to appease, whatever force is unleashing this fury.
And where's our prophet in all of this?
Yeah. Where is he?
Sound asleep below deck.
Right.
The irony is almost palpable. These pagan sailors are proactive,
Right.
seeking divine help, while Jonah, the man who supposedly communes with God, is completely oblivious.
It's like, is he trying to block it all out?
Yeah, is he in denial?
Yeah.
The storm, his guilt, God's voice?
It's possible, right?
It's possible.
Jonah might be so entrenched in his resistance that he's just shutting down.
Right, emotionally, spiritually.
Yeah.
Well, the storm rages on. Finally, the ship's captain, he confronts Jonah directly. What are you doing sleeping?
Right.
He asks. Get up and pray to your God. Maybe he'll pay attention to us and spare our lives.
Yeah.
What a wake-up call.
It really is. It's a turning point. This captain, a man who doesn't even worship the God of Israel,
Right.
he recognizes the connection between Jonah being there and the storm. They've even cast lots, which was this ancient form of divination,
Yeah.
to figure out, who's responsible.
And they determine Jonah is somehow the cause.
It's like they're more afraid of Jonah's God than Jonah is.
Right, exactly.
And that's when Jonah, realizing he can't hide any longer,
He can't run.
he makes this shocking confession.
Right, he admits it.
Yeah.
That he's running away from God.
He comes clean.
And that the storm, it's a direct consequence of his disobedience.
And then he says something unthinkable.
Yeah, he tells him to throw him overboard.
I mean, it's a desperate act. It's this moment of intense drama. He's essentially saying, sacrifice me to appease my God.
The sailors, they're horrified. I mean, understandably so.
Of course, yeah.
They're reluctant to do something so drastic.
Hmm.
But the storm, it's relentless.
It's a life or death situation.
It is. And they feel like they have no other choice.
Right.
So they finally, overcome their hesitation. They hurl Jonah into the raging sea. And instantly, as if someone flipped a switch, the storm vanishes.
It's incredible.
The sea becomes calm. The sun breaks through the clouds.
Yeah, they've just witnessed the raw power of the God of Israel.
And they're filled with awe and reverence.
It really foreshadows what's going to happen with the Ninevites later.
Yeah, good point.
Both groups, starting as pagans, they encounter the overwhelming power of Jonah's God.
Yeah.
And it moves them to repentance.
Right. But for now, our focus shifts to Jonah. Swallowed by a giant fish, sinking into the depths of the sea. It's in this moment of utter isolation and despair that we get a glimpse into his inner turmoil. Through his prayer, swallowed whole, plunging into the depths of the ocean. That's a pretty terrifying image, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Trapped inside this massive creature, the weight of the sea all around.
And yet, even in this seemingly hopeless situation, Jonah finds a way to connect with God. His prayer, offered from inside the fish.
Yeah.
It's a really raw, powerful expression of despair.
And fear.
And ultimately faith.
Mm-hmm.
You're right, it's a fascinating prayer. He describes the experience so vividly. Engulfed by waves, seaweed tangled around his head, sinking to the very foundations of the mountains. It's like he's descended into the realm of the dead.
He uses such visceral language, painting this picture of utter hopelessness.
I'm driven away from your sight. Will I ever look again upon your holy temple?
Right. A moment of profound isolation.
And spiritual anguish. But then, amidst all this darkness, there's a glimmer of light. Jonah remembers God's mercy, his power to save.
He clings to that.
When my life was ebbing away, I remembered you, Lord, and my prayer rose to you, to your holy temple.
It's pivotal. In his desperation, he turns back to the very source he's been trying to flee. He acknowledges that even in the depths of the sea, God is still there.
There's a line that really struck me. Those who cling to worthless idols forfeit the grace that could be theirs. It's almost as if he's reflecting on his own actions, like he's recognizing that by running from God, he's ended up in this predicament.
It's a powerful insight, even as he grapples with his own flaws, his fears.
Yeah.
He seems to be acknowledging a deeper truth, turning away from God.
Yeah.
It leads to a separation from the source of true life.
But is this true repentance?
Right.
A genuine turning back to God?
Or is it more of a desperate bargain?
Yeah.
A plea for survival?
That's the question, isn't it?
It really is.
We see Jonah wrestling with his beliefs, his preconceived notions about God's mercy,
Right.
and who deserves it.
And who it's for.
But regardless of his motivation, this prayer marks a turning point in the story. So what happens next?
Right.
Does God leave Jonah to his fate, trapped in this watery prison?
Well, let's not forget, even in the depths of despair, Jonah is still a prophet, chosen by God.
Right.
And even though he's really messed up, God isn't giving up on him. In fact, this is where we see God's incredible patience and mercy in action.
So this isn't game over for Jonah.
Not at all. After 3 days and nights, the fish, at God's command, spews Jonah out onto dry land, giving him a second chance.
Talk about a dramatic exit. Can you imagine being vomited up by a giant fish? Onto the beach? It's almost like a rebirth.
A fresh start.
A fresh start.
Exactly, this vivid image of redemption. And what's striking is, God doesn't even scold Jonah for his disobedience. He simply reiterates the command, go to Nineveh, that great city, and proclaim to it the message I give you.
It's like God is saying, all right, Jonah, we tried it your way, now let's try it mine.
Yes, and it's a testament to God's unwavering commitment.
To his purpose.
To his purpose, even when his chosen instrument is, well, less than cooperative.
He's not giving up on Jonah, and he's not giving up on Nineveh.
No.
So Jonah's back on solid ground. He's had a pretty intense experience. Maybe this time he'll listen.
Well, let's just say he's not exactly enthusiastic about round 2, but he does obey this time. He heads to Nineveh,
Okay.
as God commanded. And here's what's interesting. His message is incredibly brief. Just 5 words. 40 days more, and Nineveh will be overthrown.
5 words. No elaborate sermon.
Nope. Well,
No fire and brimstone. Just a stark warning. You'd think the Ninevites, with their reputation, would laugh him off. Or worse.
but that's the power of prophecy, right? And perhaps the power of Jonah's unexpected arrival.
They believe him?
They do. The entire city, from the king to the lowest commoner,
Wow.
they take Jonah's message to heart.
The most powerful empire in the world brought to its knees by a 5-word prophecy.
It speaks to the power of genuine repentance. And maybe to their own awareness of their wrongdoing. They don't argue.
They don't make excuses.
No, they declare a citywide fast. Everyone wears sackcloth.
A symbol of mourning and repentance.
Right, even the king. He steps down from his throne, removes his royal robes, covers himself in ashes, and sits in humility.
Wow, that's incredible. They're not just going through the motions. They're genuinely changing their behavior.
They're desperate for God's forgiveness.
And that's precisely what God sees. He witnesses their sincere repentance and, true to his nature, relents from destroying them. He chooses mercy over judgment.
Right.
But not everyone is happy about
Not
this.
everyone.
In fact, Jonah is. Well, let's just say he's not exactly throwing a party.
He's furious.
Think about it. He finally does what God asked,
Right.
and then God shows compassion to the very people Jonah wanted punished. It's almost comical.
It is, and it's pivotal. Jonah's anger, it reveals a fundamental misunderstanding of God's character. He's clinging to his own limited sense of justice, his prejudices against the Ninevites. Like, he wants God's mercy to be exclusive.
Only for those he deems worthy.
Exactly.
So what's the takeaway here? What's the point of this whole strange, dramatic story?
The Book of Jonah isn't just a historical account.
It's a challenge.
It forces us to confront our own biases, our limited understanding of compassion.
It asks us, are we capable of extending grace to those we consider unworthy?
Just as God did for Nineveh.
That's a pretty big question, especially today where it's so easy to get caught up in judgment and division. It's relevant, even thousands of years later.
Absolutely. Jonah's struggle is a reflection of our own human tendency to draw lines.
To create categories.
To create categories of who deserves compassion and who doesn't. But the story reminds us that God's mercy transcends our limited perspectives. It's boundless.
Available to all who turn to him with sincere repentance. That's a powerful image. So what happens to Jonah? Does he ever come to terms with God's decision? A prophet sulking because God, chose to show mercy? Not exactly the happy ending we might expect.
No, not quite a feel-good resolution. Jonah's anger, it boils over, and he actually asks God to take his life.
Wow.
He says he'd rather die than see these people spared.
So talk about holding a grudge. I mean, what's driving this extreme reaction?
I think it's deeper than a grudge. Jonah's anguish, it points to this deep internal conflict, right? He's wrestling with his own ideas of justice, his preconceived notions about who deserves punishment, and ultimately, I think, the nature of God's love.
It's interesting. So how does God respond? Does he reprimand Jonah for his insolence?
Well, surprisingly, no, he doesn't. God responds with this profound lesson in compassion, I think. He provides a gourd plant, a fast-growing vine, to spring up and shade Jonah, who's sitting outside the city, still fuming.
Almost like, here, Jonah, I know you're upset, but have a little shade, cool off.
Exactly. And Jonah, he's initially relieved, grateful for the shade.
Maybe a sign he's chilling out a bit.
Yeah.
But I have a feeling there's a twist coming. It's the Book of Jonah, after all.
You know it. God then sends a worm
to
wither the plant, leaving Jonah exposed,
like a square one.
miserable and complaining.
It seems like God is giving Jonah a taste of his own medicine in a way, allowing him to experience that disappointment, that frustration of having something he cherished taken away. Just like the Ninevites.
That's a good point.
Right.
Yeah. God poses this simple but profound question. Is it right for you to be angry about the plant?
Yeah.
And Jonah, stubborn as ever, replies, yes, angry enough to die.
I mean, he's really digging in his heels, isn't he? He's not letting go of that anger,
No.
even when it's causing him more suffering.
And that's when God delivers the knockout punch, I think.
The ultimate lesson in perspective.
He says to Jonah, "You have been concerned about this plant, though you did not tend it or make it grow. It sprang up overnight and died overnight. And should I not have concern for the great city of Nineveh, in which there are more than 120,000 people who cannot tell their right hand from their left, and also many animals?"
Wow. It's like mic drop moment.
Right.
God's words, they highlight the absurdity of Jonah's, narrow perspective.
His priorities.
His priorities. He's contrasting Jonah's self-centered anger with the vastness of his own compassion. A compassion that extends not only to the people of Nineveh, but even to the animals.
Yeah, it's powerful. It's humbling. God is challenging Jonah and us to expand our own understanding of what it means to love, to show mercy, to embrace those who might be different from us.
Even our enemies.
Even our enemies.
So what does this all mean for us today? I mean, thousands of years after this story, this event happened, what's the ultimate message we should take away from this deep dive into Jonah?
Well, the Book of Jonah, it isn't just an ancient tale, right? It's a mirror.
Reflecting our own capacity for compassion.
Right. Our own struggles with prejudice, with judgment.
Challenges us to ask, are we more concerned with our own comfort, our own sense of justice, than with the well-being of others?
Even those we perceive as undeserving.
Yeah.
Exactly. And the story leaves us with this thought-provoking question, maybe unsettling for some. If God can offer forgiveness to a city like Nineveh, known for brutality, who are we to withhold forgiveness, to withhold compassion from others?
Wow. Yeah, that's a powerful message. It speaks to the relevance of Jonah even today. God's love, it's bigger than our understanding, bigger than our prejudices, bigger than our anger.
It encompasses all creation.
It does, beckoning us to do the same.
It really is a call to move beyond our comfort zones, to challenge our assumptions.
To embrace a more compassionate view of the world.
Yes.
Well, there you have it. Our deep dive into the Book of Jonah. Quite a journey. Drama, intrigue, profound insights. Hopefully you found it as thought-provoking as I have.
Me too.
Until next time, keep exploring. Keep questioning. Keep diving deep.